My husband hits me every night while I'm carrying his baby after he got promoted, not knowing my secret billionaire father owns his company. He didn't just lose control once. It began with one hit, one push. Before we start, please subscribe. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from and how this story touched your heart. One night, he came home late from his new job at a shipping company in Phoenix, smelling like alcohol and perfume she never wore. Then it became normal. Not every single night, but enough times that evenings in their small apartment off East Thomas Road in Phoenix all felt the same. Keys dropping on the counter, a quick temper, and Sarah pulling back before he even shouted. She was pregnant, counting weeks on a free phone app, touching her stomach in the dark, hoping the baby couldn't feel every hit that left marks on her body and broke her heart. That woman was Sarah Mitchell, 27, a hospital desk worker everyone at the clinic knew as the shy one who always worked the night shift. At home, she was the wife who cooked, made lunches, watched every dollar at the store, and forgave too much. She watched her husband, James Cooper, go from complaining about his $58,000 paycheck to bragging loud once his money jumped to $92,000 after his promotion at Desert Valley Logistics in Phoenix. On a rooftop restaurant in downtown Phoenix with views of Camelback Mountain, she whispered, "I'm pregnant." She expected happy tears, a kiss, maybe that soft look he used to give her. Instead, she saw his smile drop too fast, like he was counting money, not dreaming. He thought she was stuck. He thought she was just a broke wife in Phoenix with nowhere to run, no family close by, and a baby tying her to his anger. He thought the bruises she hid under her work clothes at Banner Health Clinics and the tears she cried alone at a coffee shop on Central Avenue would never leave that city. He was wrong, because the woman he was hurting in private wasn't just Sarah Mitchell. On her birth papers, she was Sarah Montgomery, only daughter of Robert Montgomery, a quiet billionaire whose investment company in Scottsdale, Montgomery Capital Holdings, owns 67% of Desert Valley Logistics, the exact company James walked around acting like he ran. While James kissed his coworker Melissa in a parking garage in Phoenix and signed fake overtime and shady expense forms, he had no clue someone higher up was already watching. Security videos, card bills, HR reports, quietly copied, quietly sent to a glass office in Scottsdale overlooking the city he bragged about owning. From the night Sarah took the first photo of a bruise, it stopped being just a sad marriage. It became a slow, quiet war. A war of hospital papers, hotel receipts, HR investigations, and a boardroom meeting James would never forget. And all of it started in a tiny Phoenix kitchen before sunrise, on a day that felt completely normal. Dear viewers, thank you for being here. When you watch without subscribing, it's like letting Sarah stand alone in that dark apartment. When you click that button, you stand with every woman who's ever been hurt behind closed doors and every child who deserved a safer home. Please subscribe now, and in the comments, tell me where you are watching from. It was early February 2021, just after 5:30 in the morning, when the tension came into the morning like cold air. In a small two-bedroom apartment off East Thomas Road in Phoenix, Arizona, Sarah Mitchell stood barefoot in the dim kitchen, packing 2 lunches, one for herself, one for her husband, James, and trying to make no noise. Outside, the sky was still black. Inside, the clock over the stove ticked louder than it should. James worked a 7 to 5:30 shift at a medium-sized shipping company in Phoenix, Desert Valley Logistics, and she liked to have everything ready before he got out of bed. Wrapped sandwiches, filled coffee bottle, lunch boxes lined up like proof she was doing everything right. She was about 8 weeks pregnant, a secret hidden under her sweatshirt. She planned to tell him soon, maybe after his next paycheck, maybe when he was in a good mood and not angry about traffic on the I-10 or idiots at work. She had practiced telling him in her head, but could never find the right time. Before she could finish closing the sandwich bag, she heard James, 31, walk out of the bedroom, already annoyed by something he hadn't even named yet. "Sarah, where are my keys?" he snapped, rubbing his head like she caused the headache. Her hand stopped on the lunchbox. "They should be on the counter. You always leave them there." "Well, they're not." He stepped past her, opening drawers, slamming one shut harder than needed. The apartment was small. 2 bedrooms, $1,450 a month, thin walls, and every sound felt loud. Sarah walked over and quietly picked the keys off the shelf near the fridge. "Here," she said gently. James grabbed them, then sighed, calming down just enough to sound reasonable. "Sorry, I'm just stressed. They're talking about changing my whole team around. I might end up doing 3 people's jobs."
He always had a reason. Work, being tired, pressure. "I know," she said quietly. "You work hard. Just breathe a little." But as she watched him, something in her chest felt tight. James had always wanted more, but lately his frustration felt closer to anger. He kept talking about being stuck at his $58,000 salary like it was a personal insult. He wanted more respect, more power, more everything. And sometimes, without saying it, she felt he wanted a different wife, too. One who didn't make $19 an hour at a medical office. One who needed pregnancy doctor visits her insurance barely covered. She set the lunches by the door, hoping the morning would get better. Her phone buzzed on the counter. A text, unknown number, just 2 words. "Congrats again." She frowned. It didn't fit anything in her life right now. She hadn't told anyone she was pregnant, and they hadn't celebrated anything lately. It was probably a wrong number, but the casual thought, "Of course you're celebrating something," scratched at an old part of her. She deleted the message, but the feeling stayed. When she was younger, living in her father's 11,000 square foot house in Scottsdale, texts from unknown numbers were normal. People she barely knew wanted favors, introductions, internships because of her last name. Her father, Robert Montgomery, ran Montgomery Capital Holdings, a quiet investment company that controlled everything from real estate to airline contracts. Her childhood was marble floors, gated entries, and drivers who wore suits even in July. She was supposed to inherit a network of businesses one day, but she never wanted money to control her life or her relationships. So at 22, after her mother's death and the media chaos that followed, she left, moved to Phoenix, rented a small apartment, took a normal job as a hospital desk worker at the Banner Health Network, switched to using her mother's last name, Mitchell, changed her phone number, tried to become just another person standing in line at the grocery store. That's exactly where she met James, at a supermarket off East Indian School Road. He'd been bagging his own groceries when the bottom of his paper bag broke, oranges rolled everywhere. They both laughed as they chased them under the carts, shoulders bumping, faces red. Back then he was gentle, a little awkward, not the man now rubbing his head in their kitchen. As James put on his jacket, he said, "I should be making more by now. I'm smarter than half the people at that place. My boss even said I'm on a short list, but they keep dragging it out." Sarah reached for his arm carefully. "If they put you on a short list, that's good. Something good is coming. You never know." He pulled away without thinking. "Yeah, we'll see." The way he said it, flat, distant, sent a chill through her. She wanted to tell him about the baby right then, just to bring him closer, but the moment felt wrong. The kitchen felt like a stage with the lights too bright. He left with a quick, distracted goodbye, the door clicking shut behind him. For a long second, she stared at the empty doorway and wondered when they'd stopped feeling like a team. What Sarah didn't know yet was that the shortlist wasn't just office talk. Management had already told James he was almost certain to get a promotion to operations manager. More money, more hours, more pressure. And as that news sank into him over the next few weeks, it wouldn't make him kinder. It would make him dangerous.
James didn't say a word on the drive to downtown Phoenix. It was the second week of March 2021, just after 6 p.m., the evening sun sinking behind the buildings around Camelback Mountain. Sarah watched the city blur past the passenger window, fingers resting on the seatbelt, trying to guess his mood. He'd come home from work unusually energized, tossed his tie on the couch and said, "Get dressed, we're going out." They almost never went out on a weeknight. He pulled into a parking garage near Mill Avenue and finally spoke, voice flat and too casual for what he was about to say. "I got the promotion." For a second, the words didn't register. Then they did, and excitement rose in her chest like a quick breath. "James, that's amazing," she said, reaching for his arm. "When? How?" "They made it official today," he said, with a shrug that tried to hide how proud he was. "Operations manager. I'll be making around 92 grand this year. Finally." Promotions at Desert Valley normally took months of review. He'd been talking about being on the short list for weeks. She'd pictured a long process, not a sudden announcement in a rooftop dinner. But she pushed down the questions and smiled anyway. "That's incredible. I'm proud of you," she said, squeezing his arm. He smirked, tapping the parking ticket against the steering wheel. "Told you they couldn't hold me back forever. Let's celebrate properly for once." They stepped into the cool evening air. Parking alone was expensive, but James didn't seem to care. He walked ahead of her, shoulders back, his voice a little louder than usual when he told the hostess at the rooftop restaurant, "Reservation for Cooper, celebrating a promotion tonight." The place overlooked the city lights, all warm lights and glass panels, the kind of restaurant they usually saved for anniversaries because meals cost $30 to $45 each. The view was stunning, the kind that made you feel small and lucky at the same time. Inside, James felt bigger. He laughed louder, dropped phrases like executive-level responsibilities and strategic decisions, and mentioned his new title at least 3 times before they'd even ordered. Sarah sat across from him, cardigan neatly folded over her chair, one hand resting lightly on her lower stomach. The secret inside her felt heavier. When the waiters stepped away after taking their orders, she decided to stop waiting. "James," she said, soft, "I have something to tell you." He looked up from his phone. "Yeah?" "I'm pregnant." For half a second, she saw the old James in his eyes, the one who'd once held her on their second date, and whispered, "Someday, I want kids with you." But the warmth faded almost immediately. His smile tightened. His eyes flicked down to the table, and whatever softness she'd hoped for was replaced by calculation. "That's great," he said, not excited, not touched, just surprised and already somewhere else in his head, doing math on childcare costs and mortgages and professional image. Her stomach twisted. He's shocked, she told herself. Men take a second to process things. Give him time. She tried to keep the moment alive. "I'm about 8 or 9 weeks. I already booked the first doctor visit. I wanted to tell you in a special way, but," she gestured around them, "this felt right." He lifted his water glass. "Well, to promotions and babies, I guess." She clinked her glass against his, but the toast felt lopsided. A few minutes later, a woman at the bar lifted her drink toward them. Mid-20s, long dark hair, fitted blazer, confidence like perfume. Sarah recognized her from the way James stiffened. "James, congratulations again." James straightened in his seat. "Oh, hey, Melissa." Melissa Rodriguez, 25, logistics coordinator. He'd mentioned her once in passing. New girl, smart, fast with spreadsheets. That was it. There was nothing obviously wrong about how Melissa leaned on the bar, but the way her eyes stayed on him felt too familiar. "You really deserve it," Melissa said, smile warm. "We'd all be lost without you." Again. So she already knew. He'd told her before he told his wife. Sarah smiled politely and nodded when introduced, but the realization stung more than she wanted to admit. As the evening went on, dinner blurred into a speech. James talked about his new responsibilities, how he'd finally be able to shape things, how upper management needed someone like him. He told the couple at the next table that he was basically running operations now. Sarah listened quietly, proud, but also uneasy at the way his ego expanded to fill every silence. On the drive home, city lights sliding across the windshield, he glanced at her dress and said almost casually, "Next time we go somewhere like that, maybe wear something a bit nicer, more professional. You looked kind of cheap tonight." The words hit harder than he expected. Her hand moved instinctively to her stomach. She looked out the window so he wouldn't see the tears forming. She didn't argue. She didn't remind him he'd chosen that dress because he once said he loved it. She just went quiet, the memory of his "that's great" echoing in her head. As they pulled into their apartment complex, his phone buzzed. He checked the screen and smirked. "New number. It's Melissa, in case you ever need a second opinion on those big decisions." He saved it without thinking. What Sarah didn't see, and wouldn't piece together until much later, was that James had shared his promotion news with Melissa at lunch long before he drove his wife to downtown Phoenix. And that text, casual and work-related on the surface, would become the thread connecting late-night messages, working late excuses, and hotel receipts.
By the time the spring heat settled over Phoenix that late April night in 2021, the air in the apartment felt thick enough to choke on. It was around 10 p.m. The windows were cracked, but no breeze came through, just the faint sound of traffic on East Thomas Road. Sarah, now around 4 months pregnant, sat on the living room couch with the lights turned low, one hand absently rubbing her rounding belly. James was late again. He texted at 6:42 p.m. "Running behind. Month-end reports. Don't wait up." She texted back, "Okay, everything all right?" The message showed delivered, no reply. By 10, worry sat in her throat. She replayed the last few weeks, him coming home later smelling like liquor, brushing off her questions with "it's part of the job now," talking about happy hour with the team and networking. She didn't want to be the controlling wife, but she was pregnant, and he was disappearing one evening at a time. When the front door finally opened, the smell hit her before he even stepped inside. Alcohol, sweat, and a floral perfume that wasn't hers. James stumbled slightly as he kicked his shoes off, dropping his keys onto the floor instead of the hook. "Why is it so dark?" he muttered, like the lighting offended him. Sarah stood slowly. "Because it's late. I was waiting for you. Are you okay?" He dropped his backpack onto the console table with a thud. "I'm fine. I'm the one paying most of the bills, remember? Long days come with the promotion." Even with his raise to about $92,000, his tone carried a resentment that had been growing since the promotion dinner, like every good thing came with a grudge. "I just wanted to make sure you were safe," she said carefully. He scoffed, dropping onto the couch. "Safe. I'm out working my ass off so you can sit at home with your little part-time hours and doctor appointments, and you want a check-in report?" Her chest tightened. "James, I'm not asking for a report. I'm asking if you're okay. You've been drinking." "Everyone drinks. I just got promoted. You think I'm gonna nurse a glass of water while everyone else celebrates?" She stepped a little closer, but kept her voice level. "I'm not saying you can't celebrate. I worry when it's this late and you don't answer." "There it is," he said, standing up abruptly. "Worry, nagging. You always have something to say about what I do." He was taller, and tonight he was unsteady, eyes glassy. The room suddenly felt smaller. "I'm not nagging," she said quietly. "I'm scared for you, for the baby." His gaze dropped to her stomach, then snapped back to her face. "Don't put this on the baby. You wanted this. You wanted a kid while I'm trying to build a career, and now every time I breathe wrong, you act like I'm ruining your life." The unfairness of it hit her, but she swallowed it back. "I never said that." She started to move past him toward the hallway, wanting space to breathe, but he stepped in front of her. "Don't walk away when I'm talking to you." "I'm not walking away. I just need a second." He grabbed her upper arm. It wasn't a gentle hold to keep her there. It was a hard, impatient squeeze. Pain shot through her shoulder. She winced. "James, let go," she whispered. Something in his face shifted. Not remorse, not yet. A challenge. "Why do you always have to push?
You should be grateful you don't have to worry about real pressure." Her heart hammered. "You're hurting me." She tried to pull away. His hand tightened once more, and in the same motion, his other hand swung. The slap wasn't dramatic or slow. It was fast, messy, clumsy with alcohol, his palm connecting with her cheek hard enough to make her stumble backward. The shock did more damage than the impact. She caught the edge of the coffee table with her hip, pain blooming there too, and half fell onto the rug. For a moment, the room blurred, her ear rang, her cheek burned. Her first instinct wasn't to scream, it was to freeze. She looked up at him wide-eyed, one hand instinctively covering her stomach. His expression flickered, anger, then horror, then panic. "Sarah, I'm sorry. I don't know what I'm doing. Work is insane. They're dumping new responsibilities on me. I'm stretched so thin." His words sounded far away, muffled. Her pulse roared in her ears. The baby fluttered under her palm, and she focused on that, breathing shallowly. "I didn't mean it," he whispered, pulling her toward his chest. "You know I love you. You know that, right? I just lost it." She should have pushed him away. A voice deep inside her, one that sounded a lot like her mother, whispered, "Remember what I told you. Never stay with a man who confuses fear with respect." But another part of her, the part that remembered chasing oranges on a grocery store floor, his nervous laugh when he first told her he loved her, hesitated. She let him hold her. Later, in the bathroom, she turned on the light and flinched at her reflection. A red mark was spreading along her cheekbone. Her hip was already tender from where she'd hit the table. She didn't even consider the emergency room. The hospital bill alone made her stomach turn. Instead, she grabbed a clean washcloth, ran it under cold water, and pressed it against her face. Her hands were shaking. She stood there a long time. She thought about calling the police. She even picked up her phone and hovered over the numbers, but images flashed through her mind. James being arrested, their finances collapsing, the baby growing up with court dates and supervised visits. Maybe it was a one-time thing. Maybe it really is the stress. She put the phone down. Before she turned off the light, she did something she'd never done before. She lifted her phone again, opened the camera, turned to the side so the bruise showed clearly, and took a photo. The shutter sound was quiet, but in that tiny bathroom, it sounded like a decision. What James didn't know was that the slap wasn't the end of it. Over the next days, when his temper flared, his hand would land too hard on her arm. His shove would press her ribs into the counter just a bit too roughly, leaving marks that would still be visible at her upcoming prenatal checkup. And what she didn't know was that those bruises wouldn't just be pain, they'd be evidence. By the time Sarah stepped into Banner Health Phoenix Medical Center for her prenatal appointment in early May 2021, the faint yellow bruise along her ribs ached with every breath. It was around 3:15 p.m. The waiting room hummed with quiet conversation, rustling magazines, the distant beeping of monitors. She checked in at the front desk with practiced politeness. She'd worked for the Banner Health Network for years as a hospital desk worker at an affiliated clinic, but being on the patient's side always felt different. She kept her cardigan pulled close, one arm folded across her side, as if posture alone could hide the bruises. When Dr. Jennifer Martinez, a 43-year-old OB/GYN with calm eyes and a straightforward tone, entered the exam room, Sarah tried to act normal. Jokes about pregnancy cravings, mild complaints about nausea, standard script. But when she slipped into the paper gown and Dr. Martinez gently lifted the fabric to check her abdomen, the gown shifted just enough for the bruise near her ribs to show. Dr. Martinez paused, not dramatically, just long enough for Sarah's stomach to clench. "What happened here?" the doctor asked, voice soft. Heat rushed to her face. The lie came faster than she wanted it to. "Oh, I slipped getting out of the shower, hit the side of the tub. I'm clumsy lately." Dr. Martinez held her gaze for a moment longer. She didn't look convinced, but she didn't argue. "Okay," she said quietly. "I'm glad it's already healing. Just so you know, we document any injuries we see during prenatal care.
And if you ever feel unsafe at home, even a little, there are people who can help. She opened a drawer and pulled out a small purple trifold brochure. Domestic Violence Support Services, Maricopa County. Sarah stared at the title longer than she meant to. "You're not in trouble," Dr. Martinez added gently. "You don't have to explain anything today. I just want you to know this exists." A lump formed in Sarah's throat. She hated how easily tears came now. She blinked them back and nodded. "Thank you." The appointment continued. Blood pressure, fetal heartbeat, routine questions, but everything felt different with that brochure sitting on the counter. Every time Dr. Martinez's fingers brushed near a bruise, shame burned under Sarah's skin. What Dr. Martinez didn't know was that this bruise wasn't an isolated accident. It came from a night when James, drunk and furious over a misplaced bill, had reached for her too fast. She tried to move past him. His hand caught her arm, spun her around, and her ribs hit the counter edge hard enough to knock the breath out of her. Later, as she stood in front of the bathroom mirror, she'd heard her father's voice in her head, the one from long conversations about business. "When you deal with people who hold power, keep records, facts protect you when nothing else will." She'd always assumed he meant contracts, investors, deals. She never imagined she'd be applying his advice to her own marriage. After the appointment, Sarah sat in her car in the hospital parking lot for a full minute before starting the engine. The brochure lay in her lap, the purple cover too bright against her jeans. Finally, she folded it and slid it into a small compartment under the passenger seat, far enough out of sight that James would never stumble across it, but close enough that she could reach it if she needed to. That evening, when James texted that he'd be working late again, she didn't reply with questions. She just exhaled, went to the bathroom, lifted her shirt, and turned on her phone's camera. She photographed the bruise on her ribs, the fading mark on her cheek, the faint discoloration on her upper arm. She created a hidden folder on her cloud drive and labeled it something he'd never think to open: receipts. Not bruises, not evidence, just receipts. She'd grown up around spreadsheets and financial statements. The name felt cold and accurate. Later, while loading dishes, she flipped through the mail on the kitchen counter. A couple of bills, a flyer, and one credit card statement addressed to James. He always left his unopened mail stacked on the table for days. She set it near the fruit bowl, then hesitated. A few transactions caught her eye: groceries, gas, a random fast food charge. Then one line made her still. Hampton Inn, 8924, Phoenix, Arizona. The date was a night he said he was staying late to help with month-end numbers. Her heart sped up. Her mind scrambled for explanations. Maybe it was a work training. Maybe he'd crashed there to avoid driving home exhausted. Maybe the company would reimburse him later. She pulled out her phone and typed the hotel name into Google Maps. The pin popped up on the screen, less than 3 miles from Desert Valley Logistics. Her mother's voice, softer than her father's but just as clear, echoed in her memory. "When things don't add up, don't rush to explain them away. Step back, let the truth show itself." Sarah folded the statement slowly. She didn't tear it up, didn't confront him that night. She slipped it into the same hidden compartment under the car seat, where the brochure now lived. What she didn't realize yet was that this ordinary-looking $89 charge would be the first breadcrumb in a trail, one that would lead from credit card statements to security camera footage, and soon to a parking garage in Phoenix, where she would see with her own eyes what her gut already knew. By late May 2021, the air in Phoenix hung heavy. Even in the early evening, the concrete of the Desert Valley Logistics parking garage radiated leftover heat from the day, and the fluorescent lights overhead buzzed faintly. It was a little after 6:45 p.m. when Sarah turned into the garage, her hands tight on the steering wheel. She shouldn't have been there, she knew that. But after the Hampton Inn charge, the bruises, and the fourth "working late, don't wait up" text in 2 weeks, the quiet ache in her chest had grown into something sharper.
She parked near a concrete pillar on the second level and turned the engine off. For a long moment, she just sat there, breathing. "I'm not here to start a fight," she told herself. "I just want the truth. I just want to talk." She was nearing 20 weeks pregnant now, belly starting to show under her loose navy top. She rested a hand over it as if apologizing to the baby for what she was about to walk into. Finally, she unbuckled her seatbelt and stepped out. The sound of her sandals on the concrete echoed more than she expected. She followed the painted arrows toward the elevator lobby, scanning the rows of cars. Most spaces were empty. A few employees were still leaving. Tired shoulders, backpacks, takeaway coffee cups. Then she heard it. Laughter. Not James's usual laugh, the nervous, self-conscious one she'd known for years. This was louder, relaxed, easy. She recognized the other laugh instantly, even though she'd only heard it once in person. Melissa. Sarah slowed her steps and moved behind a pillar. There they were. James in his button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up, leaning against the wall near the elevator. Melissa Rodriguez, flawless in a fitted office blouse and black skirt, standing a little too close. They looked like a couple killing time before a dinner reservation, not coworkers who were swamped with audits. "Seriously," Melissa said, grinning, "you pulled off that report in what, an hour? They'd be lost without you." James laughed, soaking it in. They finally realized who actually runs this place. Melissa stepped closer. Her hand slid casually up his chest to his shoulder. Sarah's heart pounded in her ears. Then Melissa wrapped her arms around him and kissed him. Not a quick, awkward kiss, not a one-time slip, a practiced kiss, familiar. The elevator dinged in the background, but Sarah barely registered it. The world narrowed to the two of them, and the way James' hand settled on Melissa's waist like it belonged there. When they finally pulled apart, Melissa glanced around and lowered her voice, though the garage was almost empty. "So, how's your wife?" she asked with a hint of sarcasm. "Still pregnant?" James smirked. "Yeah, she's managing." Melissa rolled her eyes. "Is she really, though? I saw that picture you showed me. She kind of already looks like a single mom." They both laughed. Sarah's stomach lurched. The words cut deeper than the slap. She pressed her hand to her mouth as bile rose. Every instinct shouted at her, run over there, scream, throw his ring at him. But her body refused to move. She was frozen, watching her marriage collapse in real time. A memory slammed into her. James, 2 years earlier in their first Phoenix apartment, saying, "I'd never cheat. It's the one thing my dad did that I swore I'd never repeat." She believed him completely. Her vision blurred, her chest tightened so much she couldn't pull in a full breath. Finally, survival instinct took over. She turned and hurried back to her car, one hand on the concrete wall to steady herself. She made it to the driver's seat just in time to lean out of the open door and vomit onto the garage floor. The mix of stress, hormones, and heartbreak crashed through her like a wave. Afterward, she sat there shaking, hands gripping the steering wheel hard enough to make her knuckles ache. Her tears streamed down her face, hot and uncontrollable. Her wedding ring felt wrong on her finger, too heavy, too tight. Up near the ceiling, a black dome camera blinked a tiny red light. It saw everything: the kiss, the embrace, the timestamp. The footage would be stored for at least 30 days. Like all the other boring, uneventful corporate recordings James never thought about. As Sarah wiped her mouth and tried to breathe steadily, she was too overwhelmed to notice a familiar shape a few rows over, an older woman locking her sedan, a canvas bag slung over her shoulder, pausing when she saw Sarah doubled over. Patricia Lewis, Sarah's 61-year-old neighbor from the apartment building, sometimes parked in this same garage when she helped at her sister's small shop a block from Desert Valley. She recognized Sarah's car before she recognized Sarah herself. From a distance, Patricia watched her cry in the driver's seat, shoulders shaking. Patricia didn't approach then. She didn't know what was wrong yet, but she saw enough to know something was seriously broken.
Sarah started the engine with shaky hands. She didn't wait to see if James or Melissa noticed her. She drove out of the garage, blinking through tears, clinging to the steering wheel because it was the only solid thing she had left. The entire drive home, the scene replayed in her mind. Melissa's arms around James' neck, his easy laugh, the way he didn't even look conflicted. As Sarah sobbed in that parking garage, fighting for air, she didn't realize she wasn't as alone as she felt. The security cameras had recorded everything. A neighbor had seen enough to be worried, and one of those quiet witnesses would soon step forward. The next morning, over coffee and the smell of desert air, Sarah's story would cross paths with someone who had survived her own version of this nightmare. And that person was already walking toward her life.
Sarah was still shaking when she walked into the Starbucks on Central Avenue in Phoenix the next morning. It was late May 2021, around 9:15 a.m. The sky was that Arizona kind of bright, and everything smelled like hot pavement and espresso. She'd barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Melissa's arms around James's neck and heard their laughter echoing in the parking garage. She hadn't planned to talk to anyone. She just couldn't stay in the apartment. James had left for work as if the night before had been normal. Kiss on her forehead, quick, don't forget to pay the electric bill. No idea she'd seen everything. She stood in line and stared blankly at the menu she already knew by heart. "Caramel macchiato?" the barista asked. "Yeah," she said hoarsely. "Tall, extra ice." She moved aside to wait, rubbing her belly absently. At nearly 20 weeks, the curve was undeniable now. The baby shifted, a small reminder that she had more than just herself to protect. Someone touched her arm gently. "Sarah." She turned and saw Mrs. Patricia Lewis, 61, her next-door neighbor from the apartment building. Patricia wore her usual soft cardigan and carried a canvas tote bag covered in faded book club stickers. Sarah had seen her in the hallway 100 times, sharing elevators, trading small talk about packages and laundry room schedules. Today, Patricia's eyes looked different, sharper, concerned. "I thought that was you," Patricia said. "Come sit with me a minute." It wasn't a demand, it was an invitation that felt strangely safe. They took a small table near the wall. The noise of steaming milk and clinking cups filled the silence. Patricia wrapped her hands around her own mug. "I saw you yesterday, in the parking garage in Phoenix." Sarah froze. Her fingers tightened around the cardboard sleeve of her drink. Patricia continued gently. "My sister runs that little consignment shop around the corner from Desert Valley. I park in the same garage sometimes. I recognized your car before I recognized you. You looked like your whole world had just fallen apart." Sarah stared at the table. I didn't know anyone saw." "No one cries like that if everything's okay at home," Patricia said, voice soft. "And it's not the first time I've been worried." Sarah startled. "What do you mean?" Patricia sighed, choosing her words carefully. "Our walls are thin, honey. I've heard James on the phone late at night, talking to someone named Melissa, not like a colleague, like," she hesitated, "like a man trying to impress a woman who isn't his wife." The name hit like a slap. Sarah swallowed hard. "I saw them kissing in the garage." Patricia's eyes filled with sympathy, not surprise. "I'm so sorry." Sarah's throat tightened. "I don't know what to do. I'm pregnant. He's different now. Angrier. He's hit me. Not every day, but enough that I never feel relaxed at home." Patricia reached across the table and laid a hand over Sarah's. "Thank you for saying it out loud. That's braver than you think." They sat quietly for a moment. "When I was about your age," Patricia said, "I married a man who thought yelling and shoving were normal. I told myself he was just stressed.
He only really hit me twice, but the fear was there every day. I stayed too long because I didn't want to be dramatic or break up a family." "What changed?" Sarah asked. "He started turning it on our oldest. That was my line. I left him in 1998. Documentation saved me. Photos, notes, copies of hospital records. When he lied in court, my lawyer had facts, not just my word against his." The word documentation lit up in Sarah's mind. Her hidden folder, the bruise photos, the Hampton Inn charge, the domestic violence brochure under her car seat. Patricia pulled a small notepad from her bag and wrote something down. She slid it across the table. "This is the Arizona Domestic Violence Hotline. You can call even if you're not ready to leave. They'll help you plan safely, and they know which shelters, lawyers, and advocates are actually useful, not just names off a brochure." Sarah traced the number with her thumb. "What if James finds out I called?" "Then you tell them that, too," Patricia replied. "They'll walk you through hiding the call, deleting records if needed, or using a friend's phone. And, Sarah," Patricia's voice firmed up, "you need a lawyer quietly, someone who understands domestic violence and can explain your rights, especially with a baby coming." "A lawyer feels so final," Sarah whispered. "What he did is what's final," Patricia said gently. "A lawyer just helps you decide what happens next." Sarah hesitated. "I've been keeping photos of the bruises, and I found a hotel charge near his office. It doesn't make sense." Patricia nodded, not surprised. "Good. Keep everything. Photos, texts, emails, bank statements, a written timeline. Facts don't change when people start lying." She leaned in a little. "Do you have any family? Anyone who can really be in your corner?" Sarah hesitated. "My dad. We're not close right now. He lives in Scottsdale. He's well off. I left that world a long time ago." Patricia didn't push. "Just remember, wanting independence doesn't mean you're not allowed to accept help, especially when you're leaving someone dangerous." For the first time in weeks, Sarah felt something other than fear or numbness. Hope. Thin and fragile, but present. She slipped the hotline number into her phone case between the plastic and the cover, hidden but reachable. As she left Starbucks, she didn't know yet that her first deliberate call for help wouldn't be to the hotline. It would be to the man she'd been spending 4 years avoiding, the man who would be furious he hadn't known, her father.
The morning Sarah finally made the call, Phoenix's sky was a flat, heavy blue. It was early June 2021, about 2 weeks after the parking garage, and she sat on the edge of her bed, phone in hand, staring at a number she hadn't dialed since 2017. Her nearly 22-week belly curved under her t-shirt. She rested one palm over it and tried to steady her breathing. The hotline number Patricia gave her was written on a sticky note on the nightstand. She'd already called it once from Patricia's phone. They'd helped her think through safety plans, talked about temporary protective orders, recommended a few family law attorneys in Maricopa County. She'd even had a brief phone consult with one, just enough to understand she wasn't trapped legally. But there was one more person who needed to know. Her thumb hovered over the screen. When Robert Montgomery, 62, answered with a cautious hello, her throat closed up. "Dad," she managed. Then the tears came. She didn't even get to his name before her voice broke. There was a long pause. Then his tone shifted instantly. "Sarah, where are you? Are you safe?" "Yes," she said, not entirely sure it was true. "I'm in Phoenix. I'm okay. I really need to see you." 2 hours later, she stood in the lobby of Montgomery Capital Holdings in downtown Scottsdale. The marble floors gleamed. The air smelled like polished wood and espresso. People in tailored suits moved with purposeful calm, greeting each other with nods and clipped phrases. Sarah felt underdressed in her cardigan and flats, her pregnancy showing under a simple dress. She hadn't been here since before her mother died. She'd sworn she never would. The receptionist didn't ask questions. "Top floor, he's waiting for you." She rode the private elevator up. When the doors opened, she stepped into her father's office, a large, glass-walled room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Scottsdale Fashion Square, Camelback Mountain, the distant shimmer of the McDowell Mountains, they all spread out below like arranged pieces on one of his deal charts. Robert crossed the room faster than she expected, taller than she remembered. Silver hair swept back, suit immaculate. For a second, he just looked at her. Then he pulled her into a hug. It knocked the air out of her in the best possible way. "I'm sorry," she choked out against his shoulder. "I should have called sooner. He pulled back just enough to see her face. His eyes moved from her eyes to her cheek, to the careful way she held herself, to the curve of her stomach. His expression changed. "Who did this to you?" he asked quietly. There was no business tone now, just controlled fury. "James," she whispered. The name tasted wrong. He gestured to the chair in front of his desk. "Sit, start from the beginning, and don't leave anything out." She started with the good parts, how they met at the grocery store, the early kindness, the way he'd made her forget for a while that she was the daughter of a billionaire. Then she moved into the rest, the promotion, the rooftop dinner, the first slap, the shove into the counter, the bruises, the late nights, the Hampton Inn charge, the parking garage kiss with Melissa, Patricia, the hotline, the folder on her phone labeled receipts. Her tears shook, but she didn't stop. Robert didn't interrupt. He just listened, jaw tightening, hands clasped so tightly his knuckles paled. When she finished, her phone lay between them on the desk. The screen was open to her hidden folder. He picked it up carefully, scrolling through the photos. Bruises, hotel screenshots, call logs, a picture of the brochure Dr. Martinez had given her. He opened the Notes app and saw dates and short descriptions. April 24th, first time he hit me. May 3rd, bruise on ribs. May 26th, saw him kissing coworker in the garage. "You did exactly what you should have," he said, voice low. "You documented." "I didn't know what else to do. I didn't want to come back to you and just fall into your money again. That's why I left, remember? After Mom died?" He winced. The old wound between them pulsed. "I know why you left," he said softly. "You didn't want your life dictated by my bank account or the media. I respected that, even if I hated it." He exhaled slowly. "I checked in from a distance, you know. When I eventually found out you'd married someone named James Cooper, who worked in logistics, my team pulled a basic file. HR records, LinkedIn, nothing invasive, just enough to know he was at Desert Valley Logistics." "Desert Valley," Sarah repeated, stunned. "You know that company?" His jaw tightened. "I own 67% of it through Montgomery Capital." Her brain scrambled to catch up. "So James works for your company?" "One of them, which makes this more complicated and also simpler." He set her phone back on the desk, screen dark now. "Legally," he continued, "your marriage and his employment are separate. I can't fire him just because he hurt my daughter, but I can insist my company investigate any fraud, harassment, or ethics violations tied to his role, and based on your documentation and that hotel charge near his office," he tapped the desk lightly, "I'd be surprised if his hands were clean at work." She remembered the credit card statement. Some of those hotel and restaurant charges were on his personal card, but he mentioned company cards sometimes. I didn't pay attention. He opened a drawer and took out a legal pad. "I'm going to have the CEO initiate a quiet internal audit focused on expense reports and conduct for his position. HR and legal will handle it officially. If he's misusing company funds, if there's sexual misconduct with his subordinate, that's grounds for termination on its own." "What about me?" she asked, voice small. "About the baby?" "You," he said firmly, "will have a lawyer, a good one. I'll pay for them, but they'll work for you, not for me. You'll plan your exits safely.
That means no dramatic confrontations, no announcing you're leaving until you have a protection order lined up and somewhere safe to go. Understood?" She nodded, tears returning. "I don't want him to take the baby." "He won't, not if we're smart. Between your documentation, your doctor's notes, your neighbor's testimony, and his impending employment record," his eyes darkened, "he's built his own trap." He flipped through the printed screenshots he'd already had his assistant pull from her phone while they talked. One expense line caught his eye, the date, the location, the time. And as Robert reviewed the documents, he saw something Sarah had missed, a pattern of charges tied directly to company accounts on nights James claimed to be saving the team. Robert looked up. Decision made. What happens next is going to change his life and yours, but you won't face it alone this time.
By late June 2021, mornings in Phoenix had started to cool slightly. But inside Desert Valley Logistics headquarters, the temperature seemed to rise by the hour. At 8:07 a.m., an email went out to all managers. Subject: Internal Compliance Review. Immediate. Desert Valley Logistics, in partnership with Montgomery Capital Holdings, is conducting a targeted review of expense, overtime, and ethics compliance for certain management roles. Your cooperation is required. Most people barely glanced at it. James Cooper read it twice. His stomach tightened. He told himself it was just another routine corporate thing. Big companies did audits all the time. But his gut said otherwise. At 9:30 a.m., his desk phone rang. "James Cooper," he answered. "James, it's Lisa Price from HR," came a calm voice. "Please come to the 10th floor conference room at 9:45. Bring your laptop." He hung up slower than he picked up. The walk to the elevator felt longer than usual. He noticed things he never noticed. Scuffs on the floor, a stain on the carpet, the way one fluorescent light flickered in the hallway. His heart hammered a little too fast for a man who kept telling himself he had nothing to worry about. When he stepped into the glass-walled conference room, Lisa Price, 39, head of HR, sat at the table with a folder in front of her. Beside her sat David Chen, 42, from the legal department, and another HR specialist taking notes. "Have a seat, James," Lisa said. He did, trying to keep his shoulders relaxed. "We're conducting a targeted compliance review," she began. "Because of your role as operations manager, we're starting with you. We'll be asking about overtime approvals and company card usage. This is a standard process, but I need to remind you that everything you say may be used in employment decisions." His mouth went dry. "Okay." David opened a folder and slid a printed spreadsheet toward him. "Let's start with overtime. Rows of entries, names, dates, hours." "Can you explain," David asked, "why Melissa Rodriguez has repeated overtime entries approved by you for days she was not recorded entering the building?" James frowned. I don't handle the door logs if she says she worked from home or off-site." Lisa shook her head. "Melissa is not authorized for remote hours, and security logs for those weekends show no badge activity for her, yet you approved 8, 10, sometimes 12 hours for her on those days." James swallowed. "Maybe she forgot to badge in. We needed the reports. It was easier to bypass protocol?" David asked. Before he could respond, Lisa pulled out another set of papers. "Now, company card charges," she said. "We have multiple restaurant bills labeled as client development without corresponding client meetings on the calendar. And this hotel charge," she pointed. "Hampton Inn, 3 miles from this office on a Friday night. No approved travel, no company event. Can you explain that?" James's pulse throbbed in his neck. "I sometimes use local hotels for early morning meetings. I must have..." David slid over another sheet. We checked room records. The booking was for 2 adults, 1 room, no conference room, no company account notes. James's mind scrambled. I don't remember. It was months ago. Maybe there was a last-minute training? Lisa's expression didn't change. She retrieved yet another folder. Security footage. She didn't bother to slide it this time. She opened it in front of her and turned 1 page around for him to see. Grainy timestamp, black and white still. James in the parking garage, 1 hand on Melissa's waist, her arms around his neck, their mouths pressed together. He stared, brain going blank for a moment. "That's taken out of context," he said finally, voice thin. "On company property," David said, "engaged in a romantic relationship with a subordinate whose overtime you approved and whose expenses you signed off on. That's not context. That's a policy violation." "I didn't force her," he blurted. "She wanted this. She—" Lisa tapped another folder. "Miss Rodriguez has already provided a statement. She described feeling pressured given your authority over her schedule and performance reviews. She has also reported that some of these client dinners were, in her understanding, dates." He felt the floor tilt. "What?" Lisa's tone stayed even. "James, this investigation is about your conduct as an employee, potential expense fraud, overtime falsification, and misuse of authority. We've been instructed to handle this thoroughly and fairly." "Instructed by who?" he snapped. "By the board," David said, "including the majority owner." He blinked. He'd been at Desert Valley long enough to know the company had a big investor, but he'd never dealt with them directly. They were a name on an ownership chart, nothing more. "What happens now?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "You'll be placed on administrative leave effective today," Lisa said. "You'll keep your pay and benefits while we complete our findings. You're required to submit a written statement responding to these points by 4 p.m. tomorrow. After that, you'll attend a formal review meeting. You'll receive the details by email." "A review with who?" he pushed. "With HR, legal, and a representative from the board." He opened his mouth to protest, but the words tangled. He settled on, "This feels like a witch hunt." Lisa didn't flinch. "This is a compliance investigation, James. The best thing you can do is be honest." They dismissed him gently but firmly. He walked out of the conference room, feeling like everyone in the hallway was watching him, even if no one looked up. Back at his desk, he grabbed his personal bag and laptop charger. His inbox pinged. From HR. Subject: Administrative leave confirmation and review notice. He skimmed it. Review date: July 23rd, 3:20 p.m. Location: 12th floor boardroom. He stepped into an empty stairwell and dialed Melissa. "What did you tell them?" he demanded when she picked up. Her voice came out hushed. "James, I can't talk about this. HR told me." "You told them I pressured you, that I told them I felt like saying no might hurt my job, because it did. You controlled my schedule, my performance. They showed me the policy. I'm not losing my job over this." "So you just threw me under the bus," he snapped. "I told them my side," she replied. "You're the manager. I'm not." The line clicked. James leaned his forehead against the cool concrete wall of the stairwell. He still didn't know this wasn't some routine HR exercise. It was the beginning of the end. Ordered by a man who'd sat across from his daughter, scrolling through photos of bruises and bank statements, and sitting quietly in Phoenix. Carefully acting normal around him, that daughter was already planning her life after the review.
By late July 2021, the air in Phoenix had that dry summer heat, but inside the 12th floor boardroom at Desert Valley Logistics, it felt stifling. At 3:20 p.m. sharp, the timestamp on his review notice, James Cooper pushed open the glass doors.
He'd spent the last few weeks on paid leave, pacing his apartment, oscillating between anger and terror. He expected HR, maybe legal, maybe a senior executive. He did not expect Robert Montgomery. The man sat at the head of the long mahogany table, suit immaculate, expression unreadable. Around him sat Lisa Price from HR, David Chen from legal, the company's CEO, 2 board members, and a corporate attorney. A neat stack of folders rested in front of Robert. James froze for a second, then forced himself to walk in. "Mr. Montgomery?" he said weakly. "I didn't know you'd be here." "That's clear," Robert replied, voice calm but cold. "Have a seat, Mr. Cooper." James sat, palms damp. Lisa began formally. "James, this is a disciplinary review meeting regarding potential violations of company policy, including expense misuse, falsification of overtime, and breach of our ethics code. You've received the summary of findings. This is your opportunity to respond before the board decides on next steps." Robert opened the next folder. Overtime. Lisa slid him a spreadsheet. "Multiple entries show you approving overtime for Melissa Rodriguez on days she did not badge into the building. She has no authorization for remote work." James' voice sharpened. "She worked off-site sometimes, from home." "We confirmed with IT," David said. "No remote login on those dates, yet she was paid for up to 12 hours. Lisa's tone stayed professional. "James, this is falsification of company records. That alone is grounds for termination." Robert opened the 3rd folder and didn't bother sliding it over. "Security footage," he said. The top still showed exactly what James expected. Him and Melissa in the parking garage, her arms around his neck, his hand on her waist. Another showed them entering the hotel lobby together later that month, laughing. Relationships with coworkers aren't automatically a violation, but when there's a power imbalance and you're approving overtime and expenses for that person and sexual conduct happens on company property, she let the sentence hang. "That's not against the law," James protested weakly. "This isn't a criminal court, James. It's an employment review. Our standards are higher than not illegal." He felt like the room was closing in. "What happens now?" he asked, voice smaller than he wanted. "Now," Robert said, "we address what's not in the HR file, but is very relevant to me as the majority owner." He opened a thin folder labeled with a name James hadn't expected to see in this context: Sarah Cooper. Inside were printed photos, bruises, a copy of a medical record from Banner Health's prenatal clinic documenting unexplained injuries, a short letter on an attorney's letterhead summarizing concerns about domestic violence. James's heart stopped. He asked, "What is that?" even though he knew. "This," Robert said evenly, "is documentation of your behavior as a husband." James's eyes widened. "How? Why is that part of this? That's my personal life." Robert's gaze didn't waver. "Your personal life intersects with my daughter's safety." The words landed like a bomb. "Your daughter?" James echoed. "Yes, Sarah is my daughter. Her legal last name is Montgomery. You married her without ever meeting me. You hurt her while she carried my grandchild, and you used your position at my company to fund an affair." James looked around the table, desperate to find disbelief on someone's face. No one looked surprised. They'd known before you walked in. "I didn't know she was your... She never told me. If I had known..." "You'd what? Controlled yourself? Behaved? Stayed faithful?" He floundered. "I made mistakes, but I can fix them. I'll pay the money back. The door opened. Sarah stepped in. She wore a simple black blouse that skimmed over her now 7-month pregnant belly. Her expression wasn't furious or wounded. It was resolved. James's breath caught. "Sarah, thank God. Tell them—" She walked to the table and placed a stack of papers in front of him. The top page bore the heading, "In re the marriage of Sarah Montgomery Cooper and James Cooper. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Maricopa County Superior Court." The petition stamp showed it had already been filed days earlier. His throat closed. "Sarah, what is this?" "My lawyer filed them last week. You'll be officially served soon. This is just a courtesy copy." He reached for her hand on instinct. She stepped back before he could touch her. "I can change," he said, voice frantic. "It was stress. I wasn't myself. The promotion." "You were yourself," she said quietly. "You just showed me a part you'd been hiding." He looked at Robert. "You can't fire me because of this. This is retaliation. This is—" Robert slid another paper forward. "We're not terminating you because you failed as a husband. That's between you, my daughter, and the court." Lisa pushed a document toward him. "This is your official notice. Termination for cause. Primary grounds, expense fraud, falsified overtime, and ethics violations related to a subordinate employee, effective immediately." David added, "Our obligation is to apply policy consistently. You misused company funds in authority. That's why your employment is ending." The door opened again. 2 security officers stepped in and stood by the wall. James looked at them, then back at Sarah. "You're really doing this?" She held his gaze. "No, James, you did this. I'm just done pretending you didn't." The security officers waited until he collected his bag and laptop. Company property would be returned downstairs. At the door, he turned back one last time. "Sarah, please think about the baby. Don't take her away from me." "I'm thinking about the baby. That's why I left." There was nothing left to argue. Security guided him out, and when the door shut, the room felt strangely quiet. Sarah exhaled slowly. Robert stood and moved around the table, resting a hand gently on her shoulder. "We'll cooperate fully with your attorney. HR will provide whatever documentation they legally can. You're not doing this alone." For the first time in a long time, she believed that. But her story wasn't over. There was still a baby to deliver, a new home to build, and a life to live that wasn't defined by fear.
The first real cool winds of October 2021 swept through Scottsdale the morning Sarah carried her newborn daughter into their new townhouse. Emma Montgomery slept in her car seat, tiny fist curled under her chin. She'd been born in late September, a healthy 7 pounds, after a long labor at Banner Health Phoenix Medical Center. Patricia had sat in the waiting room. Robert had paced the hallway like a first-time father instead of a grandfather. Now, 2 weeks later, the sun hadn't fully climbed over the mountains yet. The sky was streaked with pale pink when Sarah unlocked the front door of the 3-bedroom townhouse near Old Town Scottsdale. The place still smelled like fresh paint and new carpet. Boxes were stacked neatly against the walls. Books, baby clothes, kitchen items, the small parts of a life she was rebuilding from the ground up. "Welcome home, Emma," Sarah whispered, lifting the car seat carefully over the threshold. The mortgage was $2,600 a month, which would have felt impossible on her old income. But the down payment came from a mixture of her own savings and a loan from her father, a formal agreement signed and notarized at her insistence. The house was in her name. She'd made that a condition. "I want help," she told Robert, "not a new owner for my life." He'd smiled sadly and agreed. She set the car seat on the living room floor and looked around. Gray walls, a small fenced yard visible through the sliding door, a second bedroom already half set up as a nursery, White crib, second-hand dresser, a mobile that Patricia's book club had pooled money to buy. Her phone buzzed on the counter. A calendar reminder. Telehealth therapy session tomorrow, 2 p.m. After the boardroom showdown, her lawyer had pushed gently but firmly. Leaving is one trauma, the therapist had told her in their first session. Learning how not to live in survival mode is another. Insurance didn't cover everything, but with help from her dad and careful budgeting, she'd managed weekly sessions through her third trimester and now into postpartum. They talked about fear, guilt, anger, and the strange emptiness that can follow a crisis once the immediate danger's gone. Her job situation had changed too. She'd left the in-person desk worker role in Phoenix during her last trimester with a note from Dr. Martinez recommending less physical strain and more flexibility. Through an old contact at the clinic and a nudge from her dad's network, she'd lined up a remote part-time medical billing position, 20 hours a week, starting in a month. Enough to contribute, not enough to miss Emma's firsts. For now, her job was healing and mothering. Emma shifted in her car seats and let out a soft, squeaky sound. Sarah smiled automatically and unbuckled her, lifting her against her chest. The baby smelled like milk and baby shampoo, warm and small and startlingly real. She carried Emma to the rocking chair by the front window and sat down carefully. Her body still ached from the birth, but in a clean, understandable way, not the bruised ache of fear. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet. A dog walker passed by, bundled in a light jacket. A school bus rumbled in the distance. Her phone buzzed again. This time, a call. Private number. Her heart jerked in her chest. She stared at the screen, breathing shallowly. For a moment, the room shrank. Old instincts. Answer, explain, diffuse, flared out of habit. She didn't answer. The call rang out and went to voicemail. A minute later, another call came. Same private number. Her therapist's voice floated through her mind. You're allowed to not engage. Document, don't debate. Sarah took a screenshot of the missed calls and opened her notes app. October 10th, 8:13 a.m. and 8:16 a.m. Private calls. Suspected James. No voicemail listened to. Screenshot saved. She uploaded the screenshot to a folder on her cloud drive labeled Legal, Cooper, shared with her attorney. Then she blocked the number. Not today, James. Not ever again. Emma stirred against her and settled back down, unaware. The legal process was still ongoing, but the temporary protection order was in place. Her lawyer was confident. Between the documentation, the medical records, Patricia's testimony, and the HR file from Desert Valley, James's chances of getting anything more than supervised visitation were slim, especially until he completed counseling and violence intervention programs. The difference now was that his choices were no longer her responsibility. She rocked slowly, humming a lullaby she hadn't thought about in years. Her mother used to sing it when thunderstorms rattled the mansion windows in Scottsdale. Back then, Sarah was protected by wealth and gates, but still surrounded by pressure. Now, in a smaller house with cheaper furniture, she felt more genuinely safe. She thought of the past year like a movie montage, making lunches in the dark, hoping the promotion would make him happier. The first slap, the first whispered apology she didn't really accept, the bruise documented in a hospital record, the Hampton Inn charge that didn't fit, the kiss in the garage that cracked denial wide open. Patricia's steady eyes over coffee, her dad's silent rage in that office high above Scottsdale, James's face as security led him out of the boardroom. The moment Emma was placed on her chest, crying, then calming at the sound of her voice. She tightened her arms around Emma just a little. I thought losing him would destroy me, she said quietly, almost narrating to an invisible audience. But letting him lose me, that was the beginning of everything. If this was a video, this would be the part she'd look into the camera and ask, "What would you have done?" Instead, she pressed her cheek to Emma's soft hair and whispered, "We're okay now. You're safe. I'm safe. And that's what matters." Outside, the sun finally pushed fully over the horizon, sending bright gold light across the living room floor. It glinted at the corner of a framed photo on an unpacked box. Her mother holding a much younger Sarah. A new generation, a new start, a true new dawn.
I hope you enjoyed watching this story as much as I enjoyed creating it. Like, share, and comment on the lessons you've learned. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. See you in the next video.